Starting us off at number 5. Black Christmas, 1974. Ignore the remakes, this is the OG classic. Full disclosure, I haven't seen the new Blumhouse one that came out on Friday the 13th, but I do plan on seeing it over the holidays. But back to discussing the retro gem that is Bob Clark's rendition of Black Christmas. Interestingly enough, Clark went on to make A Christmas Story, which is disturbing in its own odd way. This is what some consider to be the original slasher flick. Yes, Psycho came before it, and yes, Texas Chainsaw came out earlier than that. I watched Joe Bob Briggs too. But for the sake of conversation and Canadian heritage, I like to think of this as the prototypical slasher. And it's got one of the scariest endings too. Don't worry though, I won't spoil it too much, even if it did debut almost 50 years ago. This Toronto shot Christmas creep show is an absolute blast to this day and has some moments that remain taut and disturbing in ways that most modern horror has given up on trying. This is a flick that starts strong and keeps the creeps coming. We follow a group of sorority sisters as they get picked off one by a mysterious maniac over the Christmas break. There's lots going on that the audience is privy to that the characters never find out about, making this a smorgasbord of dramatic irony with moments where you just want to scream, "Don't go in there!" Plus, many interpersonal conflicts between non-murderous folk make it so that they never really suspect that there's a real maniac on the loose. An unmonitored maniac is a dangerous maniac. The method to the killer's madness isn't discovered until too late, and let's just say the cops are largely confused and useless in this flick. This is a classic for a reason, with some chilling deaths and great camera work, especially considering that this came before the advent of the Steadicam. Death by plastic strangulation, corpses left to rot in the attic, stabbing with a glass unicorn. Oh yeah. Love the festive spirit throughout as well. We got cozy sweaters, twinkling lights, carolers singing, drowning out a murder. Watch out for Barb, alright? She's my holiday inspiration, getting blackout drunk on dark liquor, messing with the cops, yelling at people over the phone. What a woman. If you're in the mood for some 70s film grain to go along with your evil eggnog, give Black Christmas a go and tell Billy Merry Christmas, would ya? Coming in at number 4, Gremlins. Another timeless classic right here. This creature feature is equal parts creepy, violent, festive, and fun. Any movie with mass murder in the town square is enough to pull me right in. Of course, many folks out there will claim that Gremlins isn't scary, it's not R-rated, this is for kids. And to that I say, relax. Gremlins is incredible. The story goes like this. A traveling salesman dad snags an unknown creature from an old Chinatown antique store and gives it to his son for Christmas. This little cutie comes with some rules, and of course these rules are broken. And what happens when the rules are broken? Terrifying gremlins pop out and begin their reign of terror, and what a reign of terror it is. Like, dozens of people are injured and even die. They literally fire an old lady at top speed out of her house via malfunctioning stair lift. The carnage is unmatched in other PG movies. The Mogwai and Gremlins are phenomenal mascots done up in top-notch practical effects of years gone by. Stripe is especially terrifying, especially in that fountain scene. Would not want to walk in on that. I think back to my first time watching Gremlins and remember a scene that particularly disturbed me with, surprisingly, no monsters. Nope, it was Kate's haunting tale of Christmas past that really gave me goosebumps. I would say spoilers, but it has nothing to do with like the story itself, and I feel like this has been covered pretty widely. When Kate and Billy are hiding from the Gremlins, she reveals that when she was younger, her dad had snapped his neck in an attempt to come down the chimney as Santa Claus. She and her mom didn't realize until days later when the smell alerted to them what they had previously thought was a dead cat. Nope, not little Tiger, but instead a rigor mortis ridden dad, still in full Santa garb. Talk about claustrophobia. I'm getting cold for Christmas, aren't I? Filling out our number 3 spot, Silent Night, Deadly Night. Speaking of claustrophobia, here is a flick that stirred up some serious claustroversy back when it was released. Okay, I'm sorry, controversy. Silent Night, Deadly Night tells the story of poor Billy, a young lad whose grandpa warns him to be wary of Santa while on his deathbed. After grandpa's parting words left Billy less than willing to embrace Saint Nick, his parents are killed by a man dressed as Santa right before his eyes. Years later, after growing up in a Catholic orphanage run by an abusive nun, Billy is forced to dress up as Santa for the department store he works at. He walks in on a coworker he's got a crush on being assaulted and absolutely loses it. And I mean loses it. Department store Christmas massacre, orchestrated by a Santa-fearing man in a red suit. Love that concept. There are just so many ways to creatively kill people with the stuff you find at the Bay. You guys ever do that and walk through the Bay and just think about how you'd murder everyone? No? It's just Of course, wholesome families hated this concept and rallied for it to be removed from theaters immediately. Their Coca-Cola mascot Santa could not be sullied by this disgusting film industry. Interestingly enough, the director Charles E. Sellier Jr. was uncomfortable with shooting death scenes, causing editor Michael Spence to step up as co-director. Let the fact that the director was uncomfortable with some of the kills speak for how gloriously gory and fun this movie really is. A legendarily bad sequel was produced as well, reusing a shocking amount of footage from the first movie to frame the story. But hey, people get bloodthirsty around Christmas. What can I say? Coming in at number 2, KRAMPUS. For personal reasons, I must tell you that this movie is cursed. Do not speak the Krampus's name in vain, lest you fall under his spell as well. Upon seeing this movie in theaters on opening night, my roommates and I ran straight into a terrible streak of bad luck, and the only explanation we could muster was that Krampus had deemed us naughty. Not nice. But that is a story for another day. For now, we'll discuss why Krampus is such a freaky and fun mythic movie. It brings us into the home of a dysfunctional family at Christmas time, the wimpy, city slicker liberal family reluctantly hosting their boorish hick conservative relatives. Of course it goes sideways, causing young Max to lose his Christmas spirit. And what happens when the Christmas spirit is lost? Krampus comes to punish you. Directed by Michael Dougherty, the man behind the ultimate tribute to Halloween, Trick or Treat, this spine-tingling romp has some truly excellent merry-making monsters. There's one I like to call the Maw, and if you've seen it, you'll know why. The monsters are definitely a highlight, equal measures creepy and Christmassy, and the Krampus himself is revealed in the perfect way. The whole thing takes place in a blizzard too, instilling the movie with a chilly, isolated feel. And while I wouldn't wish any of these painful deaths on my worst enemies, the characters are written to be unlikable enough that you definitely gain a sense of morbid satisfaction when they go down. And the cast is actually really good, like some big names for a holiday-themed horror for sure. We got Toni Collette, Adam Scott, David Koechner, and Allison Tolman, and they play their parts very well. Fantastical Christmas horror is just one of those genres with endless possibilities, so hopefully we see some more of these, huh? More icicle impalements and candy cane clubbings, stockings stuffed with human entrails. What's the coolest Christmas themed death that you can come up with? And finally, in our number 1 spot, we've got rare exports. The Finns know how to get down with Christmas, no doubt. After all, their folklore shaped who Santa is today. Thankfully, our idea of Old Saint Nick is a little different than what's presented in this film. We fly into Finland and see a research team drilling for samples atop a mountain, who then stumble across an ancient burial mound. They excavate using explosives and discover something truly disturbing. And uncover something truly disturbing. Hundreds of violent elves scampering around, and the original Santa Claus, giant horns and all, trapped in a block of ice. This Santa is not the holly jolly chubby man we're used to though. He is a monolithic child-eating beast. Jalmari and Juuso Helander directed this film, wanting it to be a black comedy with some horror elements. They played the whole movie straight though, so there's no fourth wall breaking or nods to the audience, which actually makes it surprisingly tense and believable. Plus, it shatters our conceptions of Santa Claus entirely, replacing the magical myth with an unsettling explanation with roots in reality. Ever wonder how Santa does it all? Rare Exports explains it pretty thoroughly. Be careful not to curse, drink, or act in any other way that would put you on the naughty list, because if you do, you are getting a visit from the big man or one of his many elves, and they're not just gonna take your presents.
Number 5 on this list is Krampus. Krampus isn't the perfect Christmas horror movie, but I think that it's fun and exciting enough to throw on this list. Krampus is a 2015 comedy horror movie, a genre that isn't often explored, centered around the Christmas demon, Krampus. It stars Adam Scott, a pretty famous comedy actor known for his role on Parks and Recreation. It also stars Toni Collette, who has been in plenty of other successful horror movies such as Hereditary and Friday Night. The director is Michael Dougherty, who is known for his cult classic horror film Trick or Treat. He also went on to direct a Godzilla movie after making Krampus. Krampus the demon has been detailed for centuries in folklore as basically being the Satan of Christmas time and the opposite to Santa Claus. In the film, Tom, played by Adam Scott, and Sarah, played by Tony, have a preteen boy named Max, played by MJ Anthony. They're hosting a family Christmas this year and bringing in relatives from all over the place. When these relatives arrive, it turns into the stereotypical image of a dysfunctional family. Complaints coming from everywhere, stress, that one cousin who you just want to kick in the face because they're so freaking annoying. After a little bit of this hell, Max, the preteen, has enough and he runs to his room and tears up the note that he was going to send to Santa, ultimately claiming that Christmas has been ruined. This acts as the inciting incident to awaken the mythological demon of Krampus, who proceeds to hunt after this family who now need to bond together and find a way to survive. It didn't receive exceptional reviews when it came out, but if you're looking for a movie to toss on while you lie under the covers and get entertained for a few hours, then Krampus, definitely the one for you. Number 4 on this list is Silent Night, Deadly Night. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, Silent Night, Deadly Night got some atrocious reviews when it came out. It was released in 1984 and stars Robert Brian Wilson. The premise of this movie is Robert Brian Wilson's character is an 18-year-old boy who has just left the orphanage that he grew up at. He was at this orphanage in the first place because his 2 parents were killed by a man that was dressed as Santa Claus when he was younger. Strapped with all of this trauma from youth, he loses his mind and dresses up as Santa Claus, turning into a serial killer. The origin story is kind of like Batman, except instead of fighting crime, he turns into the crime. Now, the movie received such horrible reviews mainly due to the content of the film. It was released in 1984, and back then, the notion of Santa Claus being anything other than jolly was basically blasphemous. One critic wrote, "You have nothing to be proud of. Your profits truly are blood money." Another critic said that he would like to hear them explain to their children and their grandchildren that it's only a movie. Now, although it got some horrible reviews, and if I'm being completely honest, I don't want to offend anybody here, but it's really not that good of a movie, that's actually the exact reason why I put it on this list. Sometimes, guys, I just want to absolutely shut my brain down, watch a bad movie with a pretty poorly written plot, and that is exactly what you get right here. The fact that it's from the 80s also adds a little element of silliness to it, because the filming style that used to be scary, it's honestly a little comical now. It's also pretty fun watching a fake Santa Claus just go around slashing people down like he's Freddy Krueger. Over the years, this movie has turned into a bit of a cult classic, and for good reason. It had a lot of shock value back then, and because of that, I think it's actually stood the test of time and should be worth a watch. Number 3 on this list is The Children. The Children is a horror mystery movie that was released in 2008. It's set in Britain and follows the story of these children turning evil on their parents. A family with 2 younger children and 1 teenager head to a secluded home to celebrate the new year. When they get there, they meet up with some other family members who happen to have 2 children as well. Everything is going fine at first until Pauline, one of the younger siblings, starts throwing up. This starts to happen to the other children as well, and it's believed by the parents that this is just due to the long car ride or something that they ate. Over the course of the evening and their stay though, these children start to turn on their parents, and it becomes clear that they've been possessed by some type of demon and are no longer acting as themselves. The movie got some pretty good reviews and is pretty scary if I'm being honest. I personally really like the fact that they're playing with the idea of children having to be good at Christmas time, and they really just flip that on its head. I would also say that the scariest thing for me in movies is having demon children. Actual demons I can handle, but the second that kids start acting like demons, that's when I get spooked. Definitely a solid overall horror movie, and would recommend if you want to get scared. Number 2 on this list is The Wolf of Snow Hollow. The Wolf of Snow Hollow is a movie that was released in 2020 and received some decent reviews. Now, it is probably the least centered around Christmas time, but the story does take place during the Christmas season, and there is certainly a lot of Christmas trees throughout the set deck. I suppose if you classify Die Hard as a Christmas movie, then this one should definitely count as well. The Wolf of Snow Hollow is based in a small, ski-friendly town and is basically a story about a werewolf. Deaths start to amount in the small town, and the officers of the town have got to track down who or what is responsible for the grotesque murders. With some strong themes of alcoholism and some really well-built relationships, this movie truly holds up. I also want to note that the editing and filming techniques that they employed when making this project are excellent at building tension. The movie is really the product of Jim Cunnings, who really took to the scene in a movie called Thunder Road in 2018. In this one, he stars, directs, and wrote the actual script, and you truly get the sense that it was done by one person because there is a sense of unity to the film, and everything kind of works together. I highly recommend checking it out if you're looking for a solid, action thriller that will keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time. Number 1 on this list is Rare Export's A Christmas Tale. This is a 2010 Finnish movie that received quite a lot of critical acclaim. Based on 2 very successful short films, Rare Export's A Christmas Tale really flips the script on the standard Christmas horror movie. A young boy lives on a reindeer ranch with his dad in Scandinavia. The story starts on the day before Christmas when our hero and his friend are watching some Americans blow a hole in the ground with dynamite. This is nearby the ranch, but it's off limits to trespassers. The audience becomes aware of a Christmas time legend about a monster who got trapped in the ice and was frozen. The 2 boys figure out that that must be what the Americans are trying to get to, but as you're all expecting, they're too late in trying to prevent it and the monster gets out. All of this is pretty standard horror, but what makes this movie pretty awesome is that the monster is Santa Claus. Well, it isn't exactly Santa Claus, but it looks pretty much exactly like him. So it's a Christmas horror movie where the killer monster is Santa. Like, that's so cool. The movie has 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 4 out of 5 on Empire, and 89% of Google users really liked it. Best of all, it's a completely foreign film, so you get to somewhat experience what a Scandinavian Christmas might be like, which is something that you can't really say for most Christmas movies. I also have to give it mad props because the budget was one of the lowest on this list, and yet it still is super highly rated. That just goes to show you guys that story, acting, directing, they're always going to win out in the end. If you're looking for a really cool movie to dive into with some subtitles, this is the one for you.
Well, I tell you something. Santa Claus only brings presents to them that's been good all year.
Kicking off at number 5, the Krampus. Of course, you know this guy, it's the Krampus, the half goat, half demon, horned, terrifying monstrosity from Austro-Bavarian folklore. He's one of St. Nicholas's brave companions who act as an evil foil to the jolly, gift-giving nature of old Santa across Central Europe, particularly the Bavarian regions. They're like the death metal version of Santa, and they're pretty spooky. Well, with the 2015 release of the dark comedic slasher Krampus, directed by Mike Doherty, we got to see him in all of his terrifying glory. If you haven't seen it, Krampus is great fun, and so surprisingly creepy that it kind of takes you off guard. Don't get me wrong, it's a cut and shut movie, and there's nothing more to it than a terrified family being chased around town on Christmas Eve by a ravenous, unrelenting demon from Alpine folklore. But if that's not exactly what you want this Christmas Eve, I don't know what else to tell you. Next up at number 4, Sinterklaas. What do you get when you imagine Santa Claus not as the jolly, blushing, bearded sweetheart of an old man, but instead a skeletal Catholic saint on horseback, hell-bent on enacting revenge against a society that's turned its back against him? Well, you get Saint, or Sint in its original Dutch, based on the Netherlands folklore depiction of Sinterklaas, the patron saint of children. I'm not going to lie, this film isn't much more than 90 odd minutes of slasher death scenes, but if that's what you want this Christmas, you won't be disappointed. And there are a few genuinely creepy moments where the demonic Sinterklaas truly shines. This film actually stirred up such a fuss that parents across the Netherlands tried to get the poster banned from public areas, believing that small children would misinterpret the mutilated, demonic looking Sinterklaas with the actual happy version of Santa Claus. They're not the same, guys. Santa's got a sleigh and Sinterklaas slays. Sorry, I had to get that one in. Coming in next at number 3, Harry Stadling, Christmas Evil. Oh man, is this film creepy, and Brandon Maggott's depiction of a psychopathic killer obsessed with the idea of Santa Claus is definitely the kind of vibe to get your skin crawling this Christmas Eve. Written and directed by Lewis Jackson and originally released under the title You Better Watch Out, Christmas Evil highlights everything that is wrong with a grown man still obsessed with old Saint Nick, who then takes up the responsibility of dishing out gifts and presents to those that have been good and then, well, murdering those that have been bad with a hatchet, and on one occasion, a Christmas tree star. It's interesting to think that a Christmas-based slasher film could stand toe-to-toe with the likes of Halloween and Friday the 13th, and even more so with the fact that Christmas Evil actually addresses some incredibly tough themes. From a psychological perspective, this film is a successful depiction of a warped mind. From a moral perspective, this film is a social commentary on the gaping gulf between the rich and the poor, and the misinterpretation of charity and goodwill at this time of the year. Yeah, pretty lofty themes for a Santa slasher film, but against all odds, it works, and it's definitely one of the creepiest Christmas films you'll ever watch. You better watch out. Next up at our number 2 spot, Billy Chapman. In regard to horror, Silent Night, Deadly Night is arguably the greatest cult Christmas slasher ever made, which is a sentence I could never imagine myself saying. And the really interesting thing with this film is how much controversy it stirred up, because by today's standards, this film is a walk in the park compared to some of the gore for the sake of gore movies we've had recently. Still though, that doesn't detract from the fact that it's alive in all of its red suit and beard wearing Santa slasher glory. I'm not sure whether Silent Night, Deadly Night is still getting dragged through the mud by critics holding a grudge, but really it's the perfect demonstration of what horror can do when it doesn't take itself too seriously, and then puts it in a Santa Claus suit. That is not to detract from the character of Billy Chapman though, who is equal parts gory and equal parts insanely entertaining. He's the same ilk of Harry Stadling in Christmas Evil, which, may I add, didn't get any hate from critics for what is essentially the same film, although Billy Chapman is, well, let's say he's a more direct version. Literally, this film is 88 minutes of Billy Chapman dressed as Santa Claus, grunting punishment while swinging his axe at people. Merry Christmas. What's all the fuss about? And finally, at our number 1 spot, rare exports.
Selitä sille, että meillä on täällä pukki myytävänä.
This film is actually incredible, if not completely insane and quintessentially Finnish. It also features one of the greatest mythological Christmas monsters, the Joulupukki, or the ancient version of Santa Claus in Finnish folklore, which literally translates to Christmas goat, or a horned demon that whips misbehaving children and boils them in a cauldron. Although we kind of don't get to see it in all of its glory, it's the build-up in this film that makes it all worthwhile. Plus, terrifying elves, which are actually skinny old men with beards that gnaw reindeer to the bone. That's all the spoilers you'll get from me, because Rare Exports is definitely worth a watch, whether you're feeling in the festive spirit or not. It's actually a great film, and reminiscent of the 30 Days of Night graphic novel, just the Christmas version, I guess, no vampires. It's a frantic mix of black comedy, pagan iconography, more mythological monsters than you can shake a stick at, all wrapped up in a horror movie on overdrive. What more could you ask for this Christmas?
To find out who is naughty or nice.
Rauhallista joulua.
So what better time to discuss some weirdly specific holiday-themed horror movies? Not just Christmas, mind you, but all types of holidays. We're talking Valentine's Day, Easter, April Fool's Day, and more. Coming in at number 5, we've got My Bloody Valentine. For an extra romantic Valentine's Day watch, there's no beating My Bloody Valentine. You're gonna want a scary movie to make sure your date's hanging on to you, so why not go with a classic slasher with an iconic killer? Sure, Valentine's Day was invented to sell cards and chocolate, but we're all invested in it at this point, so go all in. Plus, this movie is Canadian, so you know it's gotta be good. We love a small mining town celebrating Valentine's Day, especially when it results in an insane bloodbath, the likes of which we've never seen. See, in the town of Valentine Bluffs, there was once a yearly tradition. Every Valentine's Day there would be a big dance and everyone would attend. Everyone except for on-duty miners. One fateful night, a couple of supervisors left some miners behind underground to go attend the dance, and in doing so, they doomed the poor subterranean workers. An explosion trapped these miners with only one man surviving, Harry Warden. He had to resort to cannibalism to make it and ended up going insane. The next year, Harry killed the two supervisors on Valentine's Day and vowed to come back if there was ever another dance. So you can probably guess what happens when the mayor reinstates the dance. Folks start dying. Big time. Human hearts are delivered in chocolate boxes, boiled in pots of hot dogs, and generally mutilated. The dance is cancelled, but some youngsters decide to throw a party anyway. They then become the targets of the mining gear clad killer. Plenty of brutal kills here and a classic ballad for a murderous miner. Good stuff. So hold your Valentine close and go watch some Canadian youth get killed with a pickaxe. Coming in number 4, we've got Slaughter High. You might not know it from how the movie was advertised, but this is an April Fool's movie. You'd think more horror flicks would take advantage of this classic holiday full of jokes and japes. I guess there's one literally called April Fool's Day, but I prefer Slaughter High for its awful B-movie charm. This is not one to be taken seriously, it is literally just a barrel of laughs. Well, maybe not the whole time, but it's still worth a watch and a few chuckles. On one fateful April Fool's Day, a group of goofballs from the local high school decide to pull a mean-spirited prank on their dorky classmate Marty. First, they trick him into stripping down in the showers, and then they hit him with the good old fire extinguisher electrical shock swirly combo. But this wasn't enough for the little rascals. After school, while Marty was working away in the chemistry lab, they managed to sneak some mysterious white powder into one of his beakers, and then boom! Marty gets deep fried and wheeled out on a stretcher. Yikes. 10 years later, the clique gets invited back to the school for a big reunion, on the night before April 1st of all days. But when they arrive, things seem off. The school is locked and nobody else seems to have arrived, but hey, why not break in anyways, right? That seems like a smart thing to do. Well, as it turns out, there is indeed a reunion waiting for them inside. Beer, booze, and finger foods, as well as everyone's lockers, all in one convenient little room. Once midnight hits, things start getting weird though. One of the beers is poisoned and people keep disappearing. Some all-timer line deliveries in this one and some really great kills too. Shout out to the woman taking a bath in an abandoned high school. How else are we gonna see a melted skeleton? Marty, of course, is behind all the mayhem and has donned a lovely jester's mask for the occasion. April Fools, everyone. Enjoy being dead. Coming in at number 3, we've got Dead Snow. Of course the zombie movie is going to take place over Easter. You know, the holiday celebrating Jesus' return from the land of the dead. Classic. These are special zombies though. They are Nazi zombies, brought back to life by a curse of sorts. In fact, they're sort of like the Draugr, spirits who return to the waking world to protect their treasures, which is exactly what happens here. A bunch of students on Easter vacation head up to a cabin in the mountains for some snowy fun. As they settle in, they encounter a hiker who fills them in on the spooky history of the area. Apparently, some Nazi soldiers had occupied the area during the Second World War and looted all sorts of valuables. However, eventually the citizens had had enough and chased the Nazis out of town and into the mountains, where they eventually froze to death. Mr. Hiker also knows where the box of treasure is, but doesn't let anyone know. Big mistake though, as the zombies kill him first. Discovering the treasure later on, the vacationers become the Nazi zombies' next victims. By pocketing a gold coin, their fate is sealed. From then on, it's a blood and gore filled massacre in the mountains. The whole Easter bit doesn't really play a big part here, but it is worth mentioning. Coming in at number 2, we've got Black Christmas. Un classique. The prototypical slasher and another Canadian creation. There is nothing quite like Black Christmas. If you want to watch an eggnog and gingerbread laden horror movie, this is the one. It doesn't make a villain out of Santa Claus, nor does it involve reindeer or supernatural snowmen. Black Christmas is the tale of a big time creep who sets his sight on some young folks who just want to enjoy some holiday cheer. These poor sorority sisters. I think what makes this movie so lastingly effective is the mix of quality tension with the chilly / cozy Christmas time vibes. The winter cocktails, the lights, the warm lighting, it all works super well with setting up a festive atmosphere. But all of this is perverted by the presence of a gibbering lunatic who keeps calling the house phone and killing people. That tends to ruin the holiday cheer now, doesn't it? There are just so many memorable moments in this movie. The search party in the snowy park, the glass unicorn, and of course, the plastic wrapped suffocation. Claire's lifeless body perched by the attic window is one of the creepiest images in all of horror, and that ending? Oh boy. This is a movie worth a watch every holiday season. It truly stands the test of time. And finally at number 1, we've got Trick or Treat. What, did you think I was just gonna do a seasonal horror movie list in October and not include the ultimate Halloween fun fest? You're insane! Trick or Treat is the Halloween season distilled into one sickly sweet pumpkin spiced blood fueled anthology. Plenty of other horror movies take place on and around Halloween, but none embody the spirit of Halloween the way Trick or Treat does. 4 tales concerning the consequences of breaking the rules of Halloween, all tied together by a creepy, burlap sack-headed, murderous mascot. You gotta love it. We're dropped into Warren Valley, Ohio. By the looks of their Halloween festival and all the folks going all out with their decorations, you'd think it was Salem's sister city. Our orange pajama-clad Halloween guardian, Sam, roams around enforcing the rules of the holiday. The first story concerns the fate of a candy-stealing vandal who is caught by his school principal. The principal may or may not be more sinister than you'd think though. Next up is the tale of the Halloween school bus massacre. 4 friends meet up with a socially awkward lass named Rhonda, who seems to be a true Halloween fiend. They trick her into being scared of the supposed spirits of some deceased school children and get way more than they expected. Number 3 introduces us to some young adults in town for the festival. At first it seems that they're all vulnerable party goers, but that's not even half the story. And finally, we get a full view of Sam and his ghastly powers as an old ex-bus driver acts like a crotchety old. This is a serious Halloween classic and will be enjoyed for years to come. Add it to your yearly spooky rituals, you won't regret it.